Hi everyone. Tonight I want to do a short video tribute to Dr. Walter Williams. If you are one of my students, you have definitely seen his name or some of his research come up in my classroom, even if you didn't know it was his. If you'd like to, go ahead and Google him. You'll be able to go down a very big rabbit hole of his academic writings, his columns, as well as a lot of YouTube video lectures and interviews that he's done over the years. Very prolific scholar, wrote a lot, has a lot of videos out there. Made a couple, short films with various companies to sort of highlight his work. I'm going to talk briefly about the ways in which I knew him. I didn't know him as an academic. We weren't colleagues. But I met him a few times, and he was generous enough with his time in order to meet with me a few times. So the story goes like this. In 2015, I moved out to the East Coast in August, and I knew that Dr. Williams also lived out in the Philadelphia suburbs where I moved. I didn't know anybody out here. I knew who he was. I had cited some of his work in my dissertation on the idea of homelessness, and so I knew he lived in the Philadelphia suburbs from some of the interviews he had given. I said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and send this guy a very cold email just to introduce myself and see if he'd be willing to get breakfast with me. I didn't expect much of it. He's a very busy person with a very busy schedule. And again, if you start going down the rabbit hole of Google, you will see how much stuff he has out there. So he's a lot on his plate. Much to my surprise, he emailed me back within about an hour or two and said, yeah, that's great. Nice to meet you. Let's get together and have breakfast. There's this place called Nutty's Cafe in Devon, which is close to where he lives. He's like, let's meet there next week for breakfast. Here's my cell phone number. If anything comes up, if you need anything, go ahead and give me a call. No problem. And I was completely floored. I said, this is fantastic. I'm going to meet Dr. Walter Williams. So we ended up meeting the next week at Nutty's Cafe. And the first thing I noticed about him, he comes in and he is a extremely tall man. Shakes my hand. He's got a big smile on his face. We sit down. He starts asking me about, tell me about who you are and where you're from and your dissertation and, what are you teaching? He's asking me about my research goals. What are my goals in, academic life? What do I want to do with myself? He's asking me about my family. He's asking me about everything. All right. And he just genuinely took an interest in who I was, which was a huge surprise to me. We talked about some of his background, some of his work. I obviously knew of his academic work, so we got into that a little bit. But he also just sort of told me about, he sort of lived in the Philadelphia. He born and raised in Philadelphia, but he lived in the Philadelphia suburbs for basically his entire teaching career, which is almost 50 years. Teaches down at George Mason. He drives down there every week in order to teach his classes. Talk to me about his family. Talk to me about the area. We're just having this very nice, conversation on, over breakfast, and it's fantastic. So we're there for like 90 minutes, and then we leave, shake hands, and he says, this was great. We should do it again sometimes. I said, thank you very much. To me, I just figured, we'll do this again sometimes. It's just a very sort of nice, polite thing that people say. But I wasn't expecting much of a follow-up. But then him and I, we started to kind of regularly send emails, maybe once a month, once every 2 months. Finally got to be May, so the end of my first year, May of 2016. The emails are a little bit more regular, and we said, hey, let's grab breakfast again. And so at the end of the semester, May of 2016, we ended up back at Nutty's Cafe, and we check in, and how was your school year, and how was everything going on? And from there, it became sort of a regular thing. So it was like usually beginning of the fall semester, so around like October, right? We'd meet and get lunch, or yeah, meet and get breakfast or lunch. And then in May at the end of the school year, we'd meet back at Nutty's Cafe in Devon and grab breakfast together. The last time I talked to him or emailed with him was in June. We did, do a little bit of emails in May, sort of on cue, but the pandemic was going on. I emailed him in June because I had just won a teaching award, and I wanted to, let him know, but I also wanted to, tell him thank you because a lot of the ways in which he has written about his teaching and sort of his ideas about how to teach in the college classroom. I've tried to, incorporate some of those things in my classroom. So I just let him know that, some of his writing on teaching was influential, and I got this award, and I owe him, part of it because of that. And he emails back and, gives me an update on everything going on, says congratulations, and then he hints it with, once this pandemic is over, we need to, get back to Nutty's Cafe, and grab breakfast. Unfortunately, that was in June. The pandemic is clearly still going on, and now he is passed, and so that won't get to happen, which makes me sad. But it was just, it was nice to hear from him. Just the few times that I did, it was nice to be able to grab a meal with him a few times over the past 5 years. Couple quick ideas that I got from him that if you're my student, you might have seen some of these things in my classroom. The first is this quote from his book, Race and Economics. So I'm just going to read through it quickly. It's definitely a big influence on my research, specifically on homelessness and some of the stuff I've written on poverty, right? But he has this quote where he says, decent people, right? And I love that he starts off this quote with the word decent people, because he doesn't make it a fight between sort of Republican, Democrat policies, which is usually where it ends up. Republicans say Democrats just want to wave welfare checks in front of poor people for votes. And then Democrats look at Republicans and say, you want to cut all these programs because you want poor people to stay poor, and, you want them all just to die so you don't have to deal with them. And I don't like that approach, because I know people who are Democrats and Republicans who are all like very decent people who are trying to solve this issue of poverty and homelessness. I've been working and researching and volunteering sort of in and around these issues for 15, 20 years now. And I've met a lot of people, and all of them are decent people who want to try to fix these problems, right? Financial insecurity is a problem, and lots of different people with lots of different solutions want to try to solve it. So he starts off this quote where he says, decent people promote policy in the name of helping the poor and disadvantaged. Those policies can make their ostensible beneficiaries worse off because policy is often evaluated in terms of intention rather than effect. Compassionate policies, right? So a policy that solves the problem requires dispassionate analysis. Policy intention and policy effect often bear no relationship to one another. This idea of dispassionate analysis, if you're my student, you have seen this come up in several of my classes, but this is where I get it from. I get it from Dr. Williams. He has written more extensively on this idea of dispassionate analysis other places. But what he's saying here is like, get your emotions out of the conversation, right? He's like, if you actually want to solve these problems, you can't just say like, I have really good intentions. You actually have to do the math, right? And look at the effects of the program. Does the program work or not, right? The sort of policies with the best intentions don't always solve the problem, and it has nothing to do with the fact that the people are bad who are promoting the policies. It just has to do with the fact that, sometimes like the math doesn't work out, right? It doesn't work out. So this whole idea of dispassionate analysis, as far as how I teach it and how I try to explain to students, it's all rooted in Dr. Williams' work. And the first place I came across it was in his book, Race and Economics, which I recommend everybody reads. Second thing that he's really influenced me as far as a researcher and teacher is he talked to me a little bit, and I think he talks about this in some interview somewhere. You probably find it on YouTube, where he talks about the importance of his column that he wrote every week. Where he said it was important to him because it made him a better teacher. And you're like, how does that make you a better teacher? Because really, like, if you write a weekly column, it's like you get a little bit of money for putting your ideas in the world. But what he says is like he liked the challenge of trying to take complex economic ideas and writing them clearly and concisely in 800 to 1,000 words. So he's like, how can I take these complex ideas and make them palatable to undergraduate students and sort of a general public who's just reading like an opinion page in a newspaper, right? How can I do that? And so for him, like writing that 800 to 1,000 words, like making something concise was so important. Because it helped people. It helped him sort of become a better teacher, right? It made him think. It helped him to think more clearly about his issue, about whatever issue he's trying to promote that week, right? And I'm like, that's fantastic, right? And then he's able to sort of take those ideas that he puts in the columns, and now he has little case studies that he can share with his students in the classroom during teaching days. I was like, that's a great reason for anyone to sort of weekly write down your thoughts or your arguments in 800 to 1,000 words, because you can get your arguments out in a very clear and concise way, right? as opposed to rambling on for ever and ever and ever and ever, which many of us do, right? Many academics do it. It's like, how can I succinctly, concisely wrap my ideas up in 800 to 1,000 words and make them palatable to a general audience? I was like, that's fantastic. Like, that's something that I need to work on. The final thing that was he's definitely influential for me, at least, I'm sure lots of other people, is he talks about how he sort of upholds extremely high standards for his students. So for him personally, he has these stories where he talks about how he's happy that he went to school during a time when teachers didn't care about student self-esteem. So he sat there and he would say, if he got a C, he knew that he was only, a C student, and he would have to work in order to get an A. But he's like, but as soon as I got that A, he's like, I actually knew I had mastery of the skill, right? And so for him, he's like, if I actually want to be a more intelligent person on, for him, economics, he's like, I actually had to sort of figure out a way to earn an A without teachers saying, you don't really get it, but I'll give you a B for effort, or I'll give you an A for effort, kind of thing. But he talks about, students, he's appreciative of it in the ways that I've sort of trying to figure it out too, is there's something that comes with a student failing in the first couple weeks of the semester, like doing really bad on their first paper, and they earn an F, like you write F on their paper, and then by the end of the semester, like their final paper's an A, right? And there's something extremely important about that for the student, right? So the student knows, like, I was very, very bad at writing week one, but I figured it out, and 15, 16 weeks later, I end up with an A on my final paper, and that gives a student a sense of pride, right? That's earned self-esteem for the student, and that's extremely important, and that's one of the ways he talked about his teaching, right? And the other thing, which is pretty famous of him, that you can find again, Google it, where he talks about where he would have classes at 7:30 a.m. I think it was just his spring classes. I don't know about his fall schedule, but his spring classes were at 7:30 a.m. And he just told students, like, this is 7:30 a.m. class, that's the time it starts. He's like, you're not going to be late. You're going to be here on time. The phones are going to be off. We're going to have pop quizzes sometimes. And, I expect you to, write and complete sentences and use proper grammar. And, yeah, just like the very strict, detail, like he would hold, yeah, just like the details of it, right? And this is mostly what I talked to him about, anytime him and I would get together and eat. Is we would talk about these sort of teaching things, right? And again, he's got the policy things, he's got the politic things, he's got the weekly column things. We didn't talk about that much, right? Most of the stuff we talked about was just how he taught, and why is it that how is it that you become a better teacher, and how can we make sure that students are learning what they need to learn, and how can we just help students move through the college experience. So these are the things I got from him. I'm sad that we're not going to be able to go out and get a meal once a semester anymore. But yeah, he's a person who influenced me a lot. With or without meeting him, he still would have influenced me. But it's the fact that he was willing to grab breakfast with me a few times here and there. I just got to see this small, just a small window into who he was outside of all of his academic accolades, and he was the same person in person as he was sort of on the page, and on those interviews. He's just very straightforward, very fun. Always had a smile on his face every time I saw him. Loved to talk to people. Loved to ask a lot of questions. Just a very very good man, and I appreciate the small amount of time I was able to have with him, and his just sort of his generosity that he gave me. So I hope you will all check out some more of his work, learn a little bit more about him, and all my thoughts out to the family, and Godspeed, Dr. Williams. All right, that's all I got.